This is the Incongruous Channel, and I'm Dr. Andy Yates. And this week, well, it wasn't a show because Beetroot Radio was doing an all-day broadcast from somewhere else, so my show was cancelled. So you know what? I thought I'd do one instead. Now, this is based on a show I did in October 2018, which is available on my website, www.drandyyates.com, as a podcast. Conspiracy theory. That's what it is. So you can check that out. And of course, if you want to listen to me live, I must say www.beetrootradio.co.uk. That's where I do the radio show. All the details are on that site. Move on. Going to talk about conspiracy theories. Let me talk a story, because I don't want to talk about particular conspiracy theories, but they do shape the concept of conspiracy theory, which I think is very important, because I almost see conspiracy theory is it's a range, right? From the very wacky kind of crazy stuff, but all the way up to insightful, even scientific research and analysis, which as many times uncovered actual problems, conspiracy theories, hidden agendas, stuff like that, right? So let me start with the story. 9/11. So 9/11, I was in the United States working on a green card at the time, and I went into work that day. It was 8:30 in the morning or something, usual time I got to work. Everybody's running around like ants, and I managed to see somebody I knew, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "We're at war." And I'm like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" He said, "Check the internet," and went off and whatever. So I checked the internet, and it was just loaded with images from cell phones and other things like this, people saying things like, "I saw the plane go in," and everything like this, and it looked like a military plane, yeah, and things like that. But at the time, it was such a shock. You just sucked it in, and you've got CNN and MSNBC and all these kind of people who have the best reporting on the ground. So you're listening to them because they've got the latest images, they're talking to people on the street, stuff like this. You want to know what's going on, right? And I got to tell you, there's in the mind science of how the mind works, there's a thing called single-step learning, trauma learning, where when something big happens, you kind of drop your defenses. You don't question the material. It goes straight in to your subconscious mind. And this is what was happening basically across the United States of America and around the world as well, when they said there were 19 terrorists and there were this and that and this and that. And at the same time, my daughter was flying out from the UK, so from London, bouncing through New York to come to Phoenix in Arizona, where I lived. Well, as her plane was crossing the Atlantic, suddenly all flights were grounded. Nothing was coming in or going out to the United States like this, so she just disappeared. All the phone lines were jammed. You're ringing up the airline and saying all this. One of us called her idiot husband and said, what flight was she on? He didn't even know the flight number. We're trying to find out this and everything. A lot of communication was down. The internet kept going. That's an important point there. The internet kind of saved us there. But she disappeared. And it wasn't until a day and a half, 2 days later that she called up and said, "Yeah, I'm in Canada." They diverted the plane to Canada. We spent some time in a football arena because they didn't know what to do with us. Are we terrorists? Are we suspects? And the Canadian people are good people. And they took them in. And she was down the pub and whatever, having a good time, as a young woman would. So it was like all of this going on. And it wasn't until after, because in my mind, I didn't think conspiracy theory. I just thought, oh my God, when you saw those pictures of people jumping out of buildings, it's because they didn't want to burn to death, they'd rather fall. Over 3,000 people killed, and you just thought, oh my, this is so awful. Never thought about questioning the narrative until things started to come in, facts started to come in, and that's when the conspiracy theory properly, and what I mean by that is it was a good reason to start questioning things. Now, we haven't come to any conclusion on this, and perhaps we never will. But certainly people started to say, wait a minute, what about this? What about that? And I've got some things down here. The president was reading stories to children. He was told about it. He kept on reading stories to children. The vice president did not give an order to shoot down the plane that hit the Pentagon. They've got their own defenses. Anti-aircraft missiles, I'm sure they would have. It's Pentagon. But he didn't give that order. He avoided it, right? There were things like they found passports. So you've got this plane that goes into the building, and according to the official narrative, it burned so hot, it melted the steel, and that started a cascade which the building went down into its own footprint. But it wasn't hot enough to burn a terrorist passport, not a passenger, which there were a lot more of. One of the 4 terrorists, the passport survived and ended up down on the ground. And 2 of the same things happened in Shanksville. What? Serious? And then buildings collapsing into their own footprint. I mean, for one, the 2 twin towers, and then building 7 went down on its own, and there were some office fires in there. How can you? Really? Are you serious? And then a plane hits the Pentagon, but if it was a plane, then it hadn't got any wings. Because you can see the hole. There's no wings. And why were the planes not intercepted? Well, they were all doing other things. The United States, this great military power, just so happened on that day they had absolutely no air defense at all because they were off doing exercises and over there. And when they took off, they went the wrong way and went out to sea instead of flying. Ridiculous. Well, see, now I'm assuming and making a conspiracy theory, aren't I? And there were things about money. The day before 9/11, 8/11, it was announced that the Pentagon, one of the ones that was hit, had lost 2.3 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars. Lost it. Didn't know where it was. Say what? And then the next day, nobody's thinking about that anymore because they're looking at this horror. Really? You just lost it? And the owner of the building actually changed his insurance policy 3 weeks before the event and changed it to include terrorist attack. Well, there's a fabulous coincidence for him. Lucky, lucky man, right? And the planes, as terrorists, just by luck, by chance, happenstance, crashed into the Pentagon and hit the offices where they were trying to find out where that 2.3 trillion had gone. And Building 7 fell down, where they were also doing investigations and audits into other financial irregularities. And there was supposed to be gold in the towers, and that disappeared, and on and on and on and on and on. And it leads you to a situation of, there's a conspiracy here. Got to be. How much else could that be? But when you're in the United States, you're not going to say that, because what did President Bush say? If you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. So I'm a foreigner. Zip. Keep your mouth shut. But that was an extraordinary thing, wasn't it? And that's how often conspiracy theories grow. After an event, certain facts appear and it grows. Sometimes it's the other way around. Certain facts appear and then an event happens. I mean, look at old Trump, right? He's just gone out to the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, between South and North Korea. And it was unplanned, unscheduled, suddenly appeared. Oh, Kim Jong-un's thinking, what? What's this about? Why is he here? And at the same time, it's announced that Trump has backed off on China. Coincidence? 2 together, maybe? Don't know. What else have we got? Oh, and conspiracy theory itself. I mean, where did that come from? Well, it wasn't invented by the CIA, but the CIA certainly started using it way back. There's a document that they sent out around the JFK. It was a CIA dispatch, they called it, around when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And it was basically an advisory to say to people, this is how to respond when people talk about this. And they said things like, what you should do is you should claim it would be impossible for so many people to keep a secret. You should accuse theorists of being wedded to or infatuated with their theories. Accuse theorists of being politically motivated. Accuse theorists of having financial interests in promoting conspiracy theories. Really? I mean, we know that our minds tend to have certain leanings towards conspiracy theory. We tend to make patterns out of things that may not be patterns. We tend to be immune to critical thinking. Like I said at the beginning, when you get that shock come through, your critical factor switches off. And you don't get these facts coming in and assess them and say, well, is that true? Do I believe the source? Does it fit with what else is going on? All that kind of thing. You look for anomalies. Your big events have big causes. They must have. You know, all this kind of thing is going on. And it's rather interesting. And the problem is in our days, I mean, what are the facts? Who can you trust? We live in a world of fake news. There's fake news. There's even fake news, right? Where a source, media, for example, will put out fake news as fake news. So they'll put out real news, but portray it as they do with sensational fake news so that everybody will disregard it, but it's actually the truth. It's complicated, isn't it? And there's the idea of the grand conspiracy theory, which is like there's some big plan, there's the Illuminati, there's all these groups, the European monarchy owns the world, and all this kind of thing like this, which may be true. The trouble is, once you start sticking labels of conspiracy theory on it and stuff like this and start degrading it as much as possible, what might be true may not get uncovered. You had weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Tony Blair, I mean, he must have known that was a lie. He must have known. Because all the intelligence services said, no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Even though the US and Germany gave them the precursors for creating chemical weapons, they didn't do it. Or if they did do it, they were smart enough to say, we could end up in a bad position if we keep this stuff, so let's give it all to Syria, because they have got chemical weapons. Not sure whether it's the rebels or the government, but they have. So there's all this kind of question going on like this about conspiracy theories. And as I said, the weapons of mass destruction is a classic because there was a conspiracy theory at the start which said this is all made up, it's just an excuse to invade Iraq, which it was. Everybody who's got any kind of knowledge of this would say, yes, it was. President Bush even joked about it at a dinner. Thought it was the funniest thing ever. Harder to find than weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. And everybody laughed, even though 1 million people died. And then they just got away with it. It wasn't important. And, who cares? Who cares? So, I don't want to get too much into this because conspiracy theories, you could start talking about aliens, you could start talking about all kinds of things, right? Cover-ups and so on. Roswell. I mean, Roswell, I'm sorry, I'm going to do it. It's my channel. It's the Incongruous channel. This is what we do. Roswell, right? 1947 in New Mexico in the United States. Roswell was a cover-up, right? It doesn't mean there were alien bodies, and it doesn't mean there were flying saucers and stuff like this. Could have been, though. It doesn't mean that, though. What it means is that there was a cover-up. Because one day somebody goes out, an intelligence officer, and passes on a report to the local newspaper. It says, flying disc found. Right? And then the next day they say, nah, it wasn't. It was a weather balloon. As if a trained military intelligence officer can't tell the difference between a flying disc and a weather balloon. So what was that about? And then you find out through, I think, Freedom of Information Act in 1969 that, in fact, it could have been, if it wasn't UFOs and aliens, right, it could have been a thing called a mogul balloon, which was top secret at the time, so it would have been covered up, and it was some high-flying balloon thing that was there to, I think, detect Soviet nuclear testing, something like that, right? So there was a cover-up. And of course, once you set up that cover-up, the conspiracy theorists go crazy looking for facts and different stuff like this, and the real story might have disappeared because of all this other stuff on top of it. So, I don't want this to be too long. So what's the solution? What do we do about it? I've always recommended keeping an open mind. Don't throw anything away. Just push it out the way if you don't believe it, but keep it. Because sometimes you can link things together and go, gosh, there seems to be a sequence here. I wonder if there is. Do some research analysis. Look at different sources. I saw a friend of mine do exactly this thing when something went out on the web, and then he came back with it a couple of minutes and said, oh, it didn't take me more than 5 minutes to prove that was wrong. And what he'd done is gone to a website on the web and counted that as proof. Well, skeptical sites, fact sites, media sites, and so on have all got their bias. They've all got their distortion. You just can't rely on it like that. Multiple sources from multiple places. The pros and cons, the this and that. And then you end up with the right answer. Because there's this idea of problem, reaction, solution. That's a good thing to look for. Is a certain power, say, creating a problem so that the world, the people, whoever, will react to it, so that the same people who caused the problem can then step in and create the solution? Where does that come from? David Icke. See, there's another guy. He talks about archons and stuff like this, and I can't get into that. But he talks a lot of sense too. The problem is he's kind of straddling that fence between the bizarre and perhaps unbelievable and good sense. So it's kind of interesting. Anyway, weigh all the evidence. Look at it. Does it seem like it's true? Does it do all of this? If 1,000 engineers say buildings in 9/11 cannot fall down that way because of that cause, you got to say maybe there's a bit of truth there. Examine the information sources. Do you trust them? Well, you can't just trust websites. You can't just my website, the Incongruous Channel. I'm just giving an opinion, really. I'm trying to be neutral. I'm trying to be sensible about it. Don't support a conspiracy just because you want to believe it, because you happen to be a fan of UFOs or ancient alien theory or something like this. Don't jump on the bandwagon just because it's down your alley, because it may not be true. And don't dismiss conspiracy theories that are outside your frame of belief. Just put them on one side, like I said, because you may need them later. Because in my life, I have found so many things that I poo-pooed when I hadn't got this kind of open-mindedness that in actual fact turned out to be true. That's my advice to you. And this is the Incongruous Channel. I'm Dr. Andy Yates. Don't forget my website, www.drandyyates.com. You guys take care.